Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversation and real solutions. And today I'm excited to be joined by Dan Shaefer. He's running for Missouri House, and he's got a big agenda. And he's running as a Democrat, which is a beautiful thing. I think he's got a good platform to run on. And some of it is the rich, get all the tax breaks. We know this. We know this. We've heard this all before. We've heard Donald Trump say the reason I don't pay taxes is because I'm smart. The fact of the matter is the tax breaks are geared towards them. All the loopholes are geared towards them. The developers, the contractors. And healthcare is too expensive. The Senate, one thing we have to keep in mind is we had a subsidy. We had an enhanced subsidy. Everybody gives Donald Trump the credit for nixing that enhanced subsidy. The fact of the matter is the bill has passed the House, and it's been dithered with in the Senate since it's passed the House. We have no subsidy. People are losing their health care. As we know it, it is the Affordable Care Act. People are losing their health care simply because the Senate has not gotten together and voting on reinstating some sort of subsidy and ultimately lowering the price of affordable health insurance. And that's something I want to get into with Dan. And public schools are underfunded, another staple of something we've all been screaming for the longest time. We don't know what tomorrow holds, but we all know who holds tomorrow. Why are public schools underfunded routinely, 50 states wide? It's a continued complaint we've all had. It's my wheelhouse, education. I'm sticking to it no matter what. That's my story. Till the day I die, I will say the whole public school thing is it's really a two-party coordination. I think it's an obvious attempt to create a petri dish for an underclass, and I want to change that. That's a big part of my agenda. So Dan, jump right in, and then we'll get into a couple more. But there's three. Let's start with one, and then we can go down the line.
Well, when you talk about public schools, and yes, I believe that it is a 50-state issue, although I have not really studied that many other states. I do hear anecdotal information from other states about these things that funding private education with public money, through vouchers and things like that. I know that down in Arkansas, which is just to our southern border here, they implemented a voucher system back in 2024, I think it was, and it was under Sarah Huckabee Sanders as governor. And what they found out was that the kids that that ended up attending private schools were basically the same kids that were there before. So now, basically what happens is that the families who could already afford to send their kids to private school are still sending their kids to private school, but now they're getting state money for it, right? And so, in those poor towns out in the middle of nowhere, like, Arkansas has a lot of places where they're fairly remote. There's not much school choice out there. They don't, all they have is their public school. And many of these small towns, and not only in Arkansas, but also in Missouri, they're built around their public schools. And so, when you start underfunding them, it actually affects the whole town. In some towns, the school is the major employer. These are very small towns, but still, this is what we're doing to our rural America. And quality of education suffers. Now, we could always talk about how, schools are underfunded because a lot of people say, oh, schools don't need that much money. They're top heavy. There's top, they have too much administration. I believe that could be true. There might be something to that. So let's look into that. Let's figure out what's going on there rather than just willy-nilly cutting their funding and cutting their transportation and telling them, well, you can go to a private school and, people just don't have a choice out there. So that's one thing. That's you talked about the losing health care as well. That's more of a nationwide issue. I do have some opinions about that. And it does affect us locally here in Missouri. But, the big picture insofar as healthcare is concerned is, we as America, we spend $12,000 per person. And this information is like 3 or 4 years old now. But of all the industrialized nations, we spend about $12,000 per person total on healthcare. That includes your co-pays, your insurance premiums, and so on. Each individual doesn't necessarily pay that much because what you don't realize is that your company's subsidizing a lot of it if you're fortunate enough to work for a company. So the next rung down is like $8,000 per person. I think that's like in Germany or something like that. But Canada's paying half of that. They're paying about $6,000 per person. And is our healthcare that much better than these other countries? I don't think so. I do have some anecdotal information. My wife is from the Netherlands, and they're down there, I think, around $6,000 or $7,000 per person. I would argue that their healthcare, the quality of their healthcare, is not any different than here. So where's all this extra money going? So But that's kind of a top issue for nationwide discussions. The way it affects Missouri is that Medicaid comes into Missouri, right? And we tried to pass, or we did pass, a Medicaid expansion bill. Was passed by the people through a popular referendum. Actually, it was an amendment, and the state legislature fought it for a very long time until the courts finally stepped in and said, "Look, you got to subsidize Medicaid." And the big argument there is that, well, people on Medicaid, they need to prove that they're working. They just think they're just lazy people. Well, newsflash: over 66% of the people who are accepting Medicaid at this point are already working full time. It's just that they're not being paid enough by these big companies, by the Walmarts of the world or the Amazons of the world. They're not being paid enough to afford their own health care. So essentially what happens is that we, the taxpayers, are subsidizing these companies by subsidizing their employees. We're subsidizing these companies. And and these companies turn around, the rich people turn around and say, well, these people are lazy who are taking Medicaid. And that keeps their narrative going forward, that says that they want to cut Medicaid. So I'm just we're being squeezed on both ends in this situation. I forgot I tried to write down very quickly what the other topic that you brought up, and we talked about healthcare there and public education. What other topics did we have?
We just the tax break. So just the rich get all the tax breaks. I'm just going to bring out again on a national level, not necessarily, but the rich get all the tax breaks. On a national level, I remember when President Obama was president, and there was a thing called tax extenders. It was this whole list of tax loopholes. And corporate America got together with Mitt Romney and drafted this incredible op-ed that said we can't plan on temporary tax loopholes. So again, a whole series of tax loopholes were made permanent with the penning of Barack Obama's signature. Just a whole nother list of tax loopholes. Then you go into every president after has continually given corporate America and the very rich enormous tax breaks. The only reason I mentioned tax extenders and that sort of event there during the Obama administration is we always have this feeling that Democrats are protecting the underclass and Republicans are really gunning for the very wealthy. And really, my point has always been they're all gunning for the very wealthy. They're the ones that donate to the campaigns. They're the ones that get a lot in return. If I send a candidate $50, I'm not getting anything in return other than another email. I got your credit card on file. Just click here for another 50. So my point is how do we reverse this cycle? Like, we know what goes on, whether it's in the House or whether it's in a state House or whether it's in the federal House of Representatives. Fundraising is the key driver to success.
Yeah, it is ironic. I mean, my name is on those lists as well. As soon as I donate to somebody, it's like there's this big list out there, and now I just get, I get text messages, emails. I throw away 90% of my emails here. Yeah, as far as tax breaks are concerned, I see what's happening on the national level. Now, the way it affects here in Missouri, they recently got rid of capital gains tax on state income tax. They got rid of capital gains tax. And for what reason, I don't know, because what also they kept in place was the ability to write off your losses. So the wealthy get it on both ends. They get the advantage on both ends. They don't have to declare the tax, the capital gains tax that they make. They just write that off of their off of their state income tax. And if they have any losses, they can write that off as well. So these are methods that the wealthy class uses that is not available to working class people. Most working class people, maybe some of them, but most of them, are increasingly living paycheck to paycheck. And so, they look up and see all these rich people getting away with all these tax breaks. And look at it this way. You can make, say, $70,000 a year as a working class person, $70,000 a year, and you put in your labor and you pay tax on that labor. Or you can make $70,000 a year because you have $1 million sitting in the bank and it's making money for you, and that is tax-free. But your labor that you put in is not tax-free. So this is the way it's working out in Missouri. They're making it worse now in Missouri, in my opinion. They want to get rid of individual income tax and just go to a pure sales tax perspective, or pure sales tax to make up for the lack of income tax. And then they're going to expand sales tax to include not only products but services. So you go to get a haircut or something like that. I suspect probably wouldn't affect you, Jeff, but personal dig right there.
It does actually. I get hot towel facials, and if they put a tax,
okay.
They're not cheap.
Okay. Didn't mean to make fun. I don't even know you. I shouldn't be making fun of you.
It's all right. I like it. I like the attention. Believe me, I'm actually going to use. We're going to create that as a reel. Believe me when I tell you.
But no, so they're going to expand, sales tax to include services. So you go see your doctor or you get your car repaired or something like that, you're going to pay sales tax on top of that. And we all know that sales tax is regressive. I mean, come on, So it impacts the person that lives paycheck to paycheck far more than it impacts the person who's making $70,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year just on capital gains alone. And yeah, sure, they still have to buy stuff. We all buy stuff, but when you've got $10 million sitting in the bank or whatever, you can't buy a proportional amount of stuff in your life. So you're paying a far less amount of tax. They're also talking about getting rid of property tax under the same umbrella, and that affects people who are renting. Now, in Missouri here, and it's happening in other states too, because I know that Sherrod Brown, when he was senator, and hopefully he'll be senator again, but when he was senator, I know he had a bill in the Senate to try to disrupt companies who are going out and buying houses and not selling the houses. They're not buying them for investment purposes. They're simply buying them to rent them out. So they're turning us into a nation of renters. And guess what? They don't want to pay property tax, right? Because that's a big burden for them. So what do? They shift property tax over to sales tax. So now the renters are paying property tax as well. So this is, it's just yet another mechanism by which the rich are just bleeding the working class dry to a point where, I'm just afraid the whole economy is going to break down at some point.
Well, we actually have that momentum in Florida. They're talking about getting away from property tax. And everybody's like, oh, that's the greatest. It really cannibalizes two things. Like you said, it cannibalizes home ownership. And it also cannibalizes public education funding. I mean, that's a lot of where the money comes from. And that's the intent, again, is that, you're going to... And there was, whenever I hear of it happening in Tallahassee, I'll send in a little snippet. At least just do it for the people that have paid off their homes. And then the one home, like a sort of like a homestead exemption. But when you're talking about investment homes, you're talking about a guy that owns 100 homes, and suddenly now he no longer has to pay property tax on 100 homes. Let's just call it $3,000 a year. Let's just average it.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm not the greatest at math, it'd be 300,000, right? 100 homes times 3,000, be 300,000. Okay, he can buy another house once a year just with that new benefit, right?
Yeah.
So again, it just very much is geared towards the very wealthy and the very well-versed investor. But there's nothing in it for anybody starting out.
Right,
And there's just not. And that's the momentum now. And we've gotten, basically, for whatever reason, I like to say it's the orange guy in the White House, but we've gotten more brazen with that approach. We're able to say it, that we're going to screw everybody, and it's okay. We call it grifting. We call it this. We call it that. The fact of the matter is that a lot of people are getting hurt.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I know that the right has done, and I'm not saying, all Republicans, when I talk about the right here, I'm talking about more the extremist right. They've hung out this dream in front of people, this of unicorns and rainbows, saying, you too may be rich someday, and you won't want to pay taxes when you get rich. How many people listening to that, actually get rich? It's like winning the lottery. I mean, they hang that out in front of you. They hang the dream out in front of you. You go out and buy a lottery ticket, And it's been said that a lottery is a tax on people that can't do math. And I think that's largely true. Most people are never going to make it. They're never going to make it to be a rich person. And so why are they so, as poor as they are, why are they so defensive when it comes to protecting our rich people? And I think it's just, like I say, the unicorns and rainbows have been hung out in front of people, and they think that, it's not fair to tax someone just because they're rich. And I say, no. When somebody gets rich, it's because they've used the facilities in society to get rich. They've used the court system. They've used the infrastructure, bridges and roads to bring their employees in. They've used the county planning and zoning commission to get permission to build their buildings or whatever. They use a lot more of the resources out there to get to where they are. So they should be paying more because they're using a lot more. So that's one thing. Another thing regarding taxes too, and you talked about schools being cheated out of personal property tax. One thing we failed to do here, and this is one thing I would really like to do if I were to be elected, is something I've learned in sales. There's two types of ways a salesperson can sell something. One is on price, the other one is on value. The weak salesperson will cut his price right away. As soon as something happens, they're going to cut their price as soon as they feel a threat. Whereas the strong salesperson will sell on value. And this is what we've failed to do over the last 40 years. Everybody says, oh, the government, they don't do anything for me. No, they do a lot for you. You just don't see it. So we need to get, whether it's an advertising campaign or whatever, to show people that, yeah, your tax dollars are working for you. Here's what's happening. Here's the schools that you've paid for. Here's the police department you've paid for. Here's the air traffic control system you've paid for. We all take advantage of these things. And yet everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people will sit there and they'll use the roads, they'll use the internet, they'll use their phone system, they'll fly in airplanes, and they think it's all for free, right? And they think, well, I paid for my phone, so therefore I can use it. No, your phone uses resources that are publicly owned and publicly regulated. And without that regulation, your phone's not going to work anymore. Unless there's an army of people standing behind it, your phone's not going to work anymore. So these are the things that we pay for, and these are the things that I believe we need to sell on value when it comes to taxes, because people just feel like their taxes aren't doing anything, and because they haven't been told otherwise.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We had Dave from the Good Government Show, and he talked about a lot of good things that are going on when government is doing good things. The problem is the frustration, like you say in your website, politicians ignore us. There's a lot of frustration out there as well. And what happens generally is they want to hear from you during the voting process, during the campaign cycle. And there is really a good rule out there that you should be a candidate for as short a period as possible, because the longer you're a candidate, the more chance you have of making too many promises or too many mistakes. So they do want to hear from you, but then when it comes time when you get elected, then it's time to listen to the special interests. And that's where they switch gears faster than the Yamaha. And that's a problem, and that is a frustration, and that's how you get to the point in time where we are today. On a national level, when I listen to Kamala Harris say, I'm not surprised about what's happening, I'm surprised about the capitulation. She's a capitulator. When we needed a leader, we got a follower. When we needed a candidate, we got a snippet on Facebook. And she's the reason we have the shitstorm we have today. But the problem is that we have to get politicians that are ready to swing the bat hard, come up with some real solutions, take chances, and possibly cannot get reelected, but listen and really deliver on what they promise, which is actually, and I hate to say it, but it is something Donald Trump has done very well. He does deliver on his promises. I know a lot, just a classic example, again, on a national level, not a state level. Ronald Reagan promised to shut down the Department of Education. I was not a fan of it. I was younger, but it grew in size and scope on his 8-year tenure. The department grew in size and scope. Donald Trump said, I'm shutting it down. He hasn't even gotten congressional approval to do it, but whatever he's done, I think the buildings are vacant. As far as I know, he shut it down. I don't know that it's been approved by Congress, but as far as I know, the employees are no longer showing up for work. So he did make these promises, and he kept them. When we talk about anything when it comes to politics, when we want to talk about gerrymandering, the problem is we need more enthusiastic voters. We don't need better districts. We don't need to rewrite districts. We need voters that'll actually get out and vote for us. They're losing interest in us because we're not delivering on our promises.
Yeah, you bring up several really good points there. I would, as far as Trump is concerned, I would argue that yes, he has delivered on some promises, but he's also broken a number of big promises that he made. And so I think that his record is mixed in that area.
It is mixed, but on a law of averages, he's a little better than the rest on delivering on some of the more difficult promises.
Yeah, but the thing is, you could promise to tear down. You could promise someone you're going to burn down their house, and then deliver on that promise and burn down their house. And so he promised to burn down the house, and I think a lot of people felt that way because that gets to the very last point you made, which is more about cynicism out there. Too many people are cynical, and when we feel, I think it's a human nature, when you feel that you can't control something, cynicism creeps into the equation. And after that cynicism creeps into the equation, you get to a point where you say, just break it all, just destroy it. Let's just burn it all down and start over again. And I feel we've never been at that point. I feel that we just don't realize how good we have it in America. And I'm not speaking for everybody. I realize there are people out there that have not, the Native Americans and Black Americans and so on probably don't feel that way. But the potential is there anyways. And I think that we got as good a start as any. And we're only 250 years old, and we have a long way to go before we can deliver on that promise to everybody. But we have a pretty good start, and so I don't want to burn it all down. I don't want to destroy all these institutions of democracy. I don't want to destroy the CDC. I don't want to destroy Department of Education. The Department of Education, for me personally, or for I should say my son, is delivered marvelously in helping him fund his college education. And what's funny now is he's trying to pay back the Department of Education, and he's not getting any answers from them, right? He owes them money. It's like, it's not a whole lot of money. He's actually pretty fortunate with the small amount of money he owes. But he's like, I can't get any response from these guys. They won't answer the phone.
There's no one to respond anymore. And no one knows where $1 trillion in debt and the paperwork went. Allegedly, it was going to the Treasury Department now that they've essentially closed but the Treasury Department hasn't picked up the pieces yet. So no one really knows where
we're destroying things. And we run into that in engineering all the time. I've been an engineer my whole life. It's, you go down, you have to make decisions about what you do. And sometimes you make the wrong decision. And it's not immediately apparent until you get down the road quite a ways and you realize, okay, this thing's been screwed up since day one. Okay, let's just destroy it and start over. Okay, but I can count on one hand how many times we've had to do that, because all the other times we've salvaged what we could from what we had and move forward with it. Take the good ideas, move forward with those, discard the bad ideas. But the last thing you want to do is take a hammer and just smash the whole thing. And I think that's where a lot of the sentiment comes from with Trump. He wants to take a hammer and destroy the whole thing. And yeah, to that end, he's delivering on it. He's got that hammer and he's destroying everything. And this is where I got to say, whoa, wait a minute, where's this ballroom coming from and stuff too, But I mean, he's got a egotistical problem there. But we'll move on. But the cynicism is a huge issue I want to bring up, and I'm glad you touched upon that, because I'm an old white guy. I admit it, and so I'm very progressive in my mindset, but I'm an old white guy, and I don't want to be involved in politics the rest of my life. And to that end, my term limits are built in. I'm not going to be here that much longer. But I look at young people these days, and every young person I run into that's interested in politics, I encourage the hell out of them to stay in politics, because young people these days are looking down the road. They're seeing that housing prices are completely out of reach. If you look at the housing prices today versus 1980, compare the housing price versus the average housing price versus the median salary, you'd see they're paying 2 to 3 times more today than they were back in 1980 when I was getting my start. And so, yeah, they're looking down the road and saying, what's in it for me? And so rather than getting involved, a lot of them just pull away and say, screw it, whatever, I'm not going to vote. My vote doesn't make any difference. This thing's been so gerrymandered anyways. Why should I bother going to the polls? So every time I find a young person, there are some young people. There's a guy named Ray Reed, who's one of the House representatives here. He's a young guy. He's probably late 20s, early 30s, enthusiastic. And he ran for U.S. Congress at first, obviously didn't make it there, but then he ran for state Congress and made it there. And so I talked to him about 2 months ago. I pulled him back in the corner and talked to him a little while and said, what's going on with young people? Is it that we're not paying young people enough to run for legislation? He says, no. He says, it's the cynicism. Young people feel that they don't know what's in it for them. And I said, my God, I says, if we don't do anything about this, we're just going to be run by old white people, and then we're all going to die off, and who's going to be left? We got to get young people involved in this. And that's a real problem. I'm not sure how to solve that. Once cynicism enters the equation, I'm not really sure how to solve that, other than just personally me getting out there and talking to younger people and trying to get them involved in politics, and saying that This is up to you to fix it. I'm sorry, the boomer generation kind of messed things up. We got to, we're going to hand off as much as we can to you, but you guys got a generational challenge, and you got to rise to meet that challenge. Otherwise, it's just all going to fall apart.
Well, I think you're on the right path, because actually, I don't know what the percentage or how much more young people are involved, but they're definitely more, how many more young people get involved or run for office, but they're definitely more engaged more than ever before. I mean, they're really into it now, and for good reason. There's a lot going on and a lot to talk about, a lot of frustration, the giant hypocrisies that come from both sides. And so hopefully from that momentum, hopefully we seize that energy and we get young people involved, because the truth is, just like you said, both the last two presidents are over 80 years old.
Yeah.
We hear it in the press conferences. Some reporter asks Pete Hegseth about Trump's cognitive awareness, and then Pete Hegseth fired back, how come you never asked that about Biden's? And then we get Biden on a national stage, and he's fallen asleep on a debate floor at 9 p.m., and the White House official response is after 9 p.m. he's done. Well, that's an issue. We need a president that's alert at 9 p.m. We need a president that's alert at 2 a.m. Things happen. The world has different time zones on top of everything else. So we need young people in politics. We can't keep recycling the same old solutions and the same old legislative systems in place. We need young people involved. And like you said, that's a great thing you're doing. If you're encouraging young people to run for office or to get involved, there's a website out there, Run for Something. I mean, that's just really what we need, is just young people with no experience, because we keep getting these older guys climbing the ladder from the state house to the federal house to the Senate to the governorships, or the governorships to the Senate, whatever path they follow. But we have nothing new to offer on the subject of real new politics other than the old recycled stuff.
Yeah, and I think to that end too, I mean, I'm going to agree with you enthusiastically, except that my observation about young people, I have not seen. The David Hoggs are out there too. Their young guys are getting up there, but I want to see more. But as far as getting rid of the old guard, I mean, I can't. I'm so frustrated with the Democratic Party. And I don't want to, badmouth them too much, because I am running as a Democrat. but I've gotten in trouble with I made a posting on Facebook that was very critical of the recent DNC meeting in New Orleans, where they had an opportunity to denounce AIPAC and its influence on American politics, and they dropped it. They said, okay, no, we don't want to criticize AIPAC. Well, I went through the roof, right? And I wrote this. I probably shouldn't have done it at the time, because I was still too emotional, but I wrote a Facebook post.
Now you're saying IPAC, right? Israeli Political Action Committee?
Israeli, yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's fine. And also the acronyms are kind of, there's a lot of acronyms.
There's a lot of, AIPAC is American Israeli
Political Action Committee, maybe?
Political Action Committee, something like that. Yeah. So,
I don't know if that's basically, I have always assumed that was it.
Yeah, it's something like that, but it's basically it's a group of Israelis who are funding a lot of American campaigns and having a lot of influence in American policy. So we have this foreign nation who's wielding influence over our nation, and I can't help thinking that this contributed largely to us getting involved in this latest skirmish in the Middle East. And so when the DNC had an opportunity to denounce it, no, they didn't. So I was emotionally upset, and I wrote this Facebook post, I should say. And within 15 minutes, I got a call from someone in the DNC, and she just said, at first I thought she was going to ask me to pull this down, and so I pushed back. I said, no, I'm not going to pull this down. This is my honest opinion, and this is a microcosm of what's going on in the Democratic Party. And I think it's going on in the Republican Party as well. You have this old guard in place. They know where the money's coming from. They know what side of the bread is buttered. And so they continue to take this dark money. They continue to be manipulated by issues that are not in the best interest of the people. And this has to stop. I know that the Supreme Court, what was that finding back in 2011, Citizens United, has a lot to do with it, where basically the court said, hey, you can put as much money as you want into political campaigns. Corporations are people, and as people, they have a right to the First Amendment right to free speech, so you can put as much money as you want to in political campaigns. That is part of the problem. But that's not the whole problem. I think the real problem is that we need a commitment from people from the top down to say, we are here for the American people. We are not here for corporations. We are not here for foreign nations. We are here for the American people. And it's going to be a big boulder to push up a hill. It's a big hill in the Democratic Party, and it's probably an even bigger hill inside the Republican Party. I was an independent, and I was doing podcasts and things like that. I was an independent until I decided to run, and I decided to join the Democratic Party. And when I made that decision, because there was nobody else running in my district, I called the Democratic Party and had a discussion with them and told them, I have some issues with the Democratic Party, and I'm going to be pushing for things like ranked choice voting. I'm going to be pushing for things like reduction of gerrymandering and these things that Democrats really have been fighting also behind the scenes. They fight these things because they like it the way it is. And I said, I'm not going to play that game. And they said, fine. So I said, okay.
They wanted you as a candidate, right?
Yeah. So as a candidate, I skipped ahead there a little bit, but yeah, I was. What happened is in 2024, I noticed that there was no Democratic candidate running for my district, and so I called up the Democratic Party and said, how come you don't have any Democrats running? And they said, well, how would you like to run? So they turned it back on me, and I did the Homer Simpson, don't. But I had a discussion with him, and I said, these are my perspectives, and I'm not necessarily going to play the game the way the Democrats want to. I'm going to play the game for the people and do the best I can. And I'm in a good position to do that, honestly. Okay, I'm an old white guy, but I'm retired, and I've got my retirement fund set up, so I'm pretty much set here. I don't need, unless the whole economy crashes or something, I'm going to do okay. I'm not rich, but I'm going to do okay. So I don't need money. I don't need this. And I told my wife before, I says, if I can find a younger guy in my district, and I got my eyes on a few people, if I can find someone younger who's hungry for this, I'll step aside and let them run for it.
Pass the torch.
Pass the torch, which
That's
must
something
be done.
Joe Biden promised to do, and then he got excited during his alleged political gravitas during the midterms, and it had nothing to do with him.
Yeah, that was such a disappointment. And that is an example of what happens, when inside political parties like this. You're absolutely right. I was so disappointed because I knew the guy was starting to slip. I mean,
we all knew.
Yeah.
They keep talking about Ronald Reagan his last days in office, but the truth of the matter is, it was really during his last days in office. For the most part, he had his cognitive awareness, but Joe Biden was showing signs. They were playing snippet after snippet of him walking the wrong way on every stage he ever got on. People were like, that way. And he was reading bullet points where it says, now you pause. And he read, now you pause. And they're like,
Yeah, it's people say it's an age thing. I'd have to contradict that a little bit because, some people, they're exceptional people, but some people could live to be 100 years old and still just as sharp as they were when they were 20. But in general, people start losing their mental quickness and mental acuity. It starts to roll off, when you hit your 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I recognize I'm in my 60s right now. I recognize that. And the reality is you got to put your ego aside and do what's best.
Step aside.
Yeah, and step aside. Exactly.
And frankly, again, you're a Democrat as a candidate. I'm a Democrat, but I will never be a candidate again. But Joe Biden was never the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that the reason he got to be president was by default. He just hung in the game long enough to the point where there was just a spot for him. Win or lose, run. You're our guy. We have no one else, So he won, and he should have took that big jackpot and left with it. He should have left the table. No one asked him to hang around another 4 more years.
Yeah.
But he couldn't do it. And it's him and Kamala that screwed the pooch. And it's him and Kamala that have to lay full responsibility that we have what we have today.
Yeah.
Nobody comes back and nobody runs again after losing. Generally, you're labeled a loser after losing. And you go on to other things, especially at the age of 78. And Donald Trump came back as a loser running against a loser. And it was better the devil you know. Better pick your poison. Well, I want to pick the one I know already. Yeah. And that's an issue. And that really is, like we said to the point before, is that we've lost. We're not. It's not the gerrymandering that changes election results. It's the lack of interest. It's the lack of enthusiasm. I always say, if you want to be a political candidate, my thing has always been the restaurant business. In order to succeed in restaurants, it's not good enough to be liked. It's not good enough to be loved. You have to be craved. You have to be revered. You got to get return business. You can't just keep doing coupons, a million coupons. They cost money, and you're selling your product at half the price. You have to be. And Donald Trump is craved. I don't know that he's revered, other than But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing to revere. But he is craved. People like his nonsense. But then we got to get young candidates in the game of politics, running for office for whatever they do, right or wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think to build on that point, I think what we really need is a good leader. America always looks up to a good leader. I think the last president maybe that we really looked up to, I don't know, maybe Kennedy, and he wasn't even that good of a president, I think. But
America was young.
America was young. He was young. He was full of promise. He's World War II vet, and we'd just gotten out of the war. And we had Eisenhower before that. It's an old guy. He's getting ready to sundown. And here comes this young guy, a young war hero, and got some good ideas, got some progressive ideas. And he had some pretty good ideas. I mean, the Peace Corps and things like that he really got Americans involved. And I would say that we probably never would have gone to the moon if it weren't for him. But, but that was, I think that's the only president I can think of in recent memory. And I wasn't that old at the time. I was born in 1959. So. But we like to look up to our presidents, and people, they looked at. I get Reagan got that vibe as well, and I actually voted for him, and people got that vibe from him that he's bringing America back again. Behind the scenes, though, he was doing some very scoundrel sort of things in the Iran-Contra affair, which happened in his second term, I realize. But he was pretty sneaky in the back end, and he talked an awful lot about this trickle-down economics, which, by the way, people are still banging that drum today. Arthur Laffer, who started that, what was it called, the Laffer curve, in which a lot of trickle-down economics is based after. He's still around making waves. Grover Norquist is around making waves. In fact, I was in the same room as Grover Norquist a few months ago when I went to Jefferson City, which is Missouri's capital, and tried to testify against this crazy scheme they have of replacing income tax with sales tax. And I was opposed to that. And sitting next to me is Grover Norquist. I don't know if you know who he was, because he got started Americans for Tax Reform, and he was one of the bigger,
I have heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the people that really pushed for trickle down economics, and he also was very much involved in the state of Kansas when they replaced their income tax with sales tax, which famously failed, by the way. These guys don't understand that they're losers. Their economic model has failed multiple times, but that they're still out there pushing for it. So I know I kind of got sidetracked there, but we've got to refresh our minds. We got to have people that we can look up to and people that we can admire. And I hate to say it, I mean, America, a lot of our votes for president are emotional, based on emotion. And Reagan had the right vibe, Kennedy had the right vibe. But I don't know.
The thing about the right vibe is the way you communicate. They were great communicators. Yeah. And in a sense, the wrong vibe has become the way to communicate now, because we've been convinced by so many snake oil salesmen that promise and promise and promise, that when you finally get a guy on the stage that says, the reason I don't pay taxes is because I'm smart. Yeah. That's the right vibe these days. Mitt Romney, the question came up, you're worth $200 million and you haven't paid taxes. And he danced and he dithered on the subject and he bounced around on it. If he'd have been the guy that said, I'm smart, he probably would have been the president that year. Yeah. But he wasn't. He had to ditch, dodge, and draft, and it's because, and no, you're a hedge funder and you've been a part of creating the system that benefits you. So just say, I'm smart. That really paraphrases it all. I found it funny, and it's the right vibe or the wrong vibe. The other day I was talking to a guest. Her name is Temple Grandin, an amazing scientist, and she's autistic, and she's just this incredible person. We were talking about she had just gotten this amazing honor of placing her portrait at the Smithsonian. I was like, and that's what we were talking about, along with, and there was three others. I always only remember two of them, but one was Steven Spielberg, which I thought was pretty neat, and the other was Jamie Dimon. And I'm like, why the hell is his? I mean, it's just me thinking out loud. And I loved Jamie Dimon because he came out one time and he said, I love banking regulation because I'm the guy that interprets it. No, you're the guy that writes it, sends it to Congress, gets it passed, and it's all intended to screw to local banks all across the country, and you've done very well at it. There are no
Yeah.
local banks across the country anymore. So it's Jamie Dimon's a revered CEO that has just basically screwed everybody across the country as far as the very rich are doing very well, and again, we've really cannibalized the middle class and the poor to do anything other than survive.
Yeah, it's Jamie Dimon. That raises the hairs in the back of my neck. That guy belongs in jail. I swear. The 2008 financial crisis. He was part of the cabal of bankers and financial analysts or financial experts that over speculated on real estate. And behind the scenes, also, what was going on was they were doing what I would call deed fraud on a lot of homes out there, where they were stealing homes from people, literally by manipulating their deeds and putting people in debt and taking their homes. I'm not saying Jamie Dimon was directly involved in that stuff, but that's the kind of shenanigans that was going on back then. And this is where I really come down hard on Barack Obama and Eric Holder, his attorney general. These guys screwed the pooch big time. They should have been going after the Jamie Dimons of the world and throwing these guys in jail. They should have pierced the corporate bubble, thrown these guys in jail. Because the fact is, ever since the Powell memo was written back in 1971, I think it was written by, was that Jerome Powell?
Yeah.
Who became a justice.
Chief. Yeah.
Yeah, and that started this whole deal where started this whole mindset in America where CEOs were gods and they could do no wrong. And so it was all about getting rid of regulations. It was all about, fast forward, 20 years into the 1990s, even under the Clinton administration, they got rid of the last vestiges of the Glass-Steagall Act,
right,
which prevent financial institutions from over speculating. 10 years after that, we get the 2008 financial crisis. And then when Obama took over, he had no interest at all in going after the robber barons that did this to us. Eric Holder himself came from Covington and Burling, I think it was a law firm that represented many of these financial institutions. Then he became Attorney General under Barack Obama in 2015. Eric Holder leaves. He resigns his position, goes back to work for Covington and Burling, I think it was. I probably got those names wrong, but he goes back to working for the same law firm that was protecting these financial institutions. These guys were insiders the whole time.
The whole thing goes
it goes right into the Obama administration. I think he made a huge mistake there. I would say it wasn't a mistake. I think it was intentional.
It's not a mistake at all.
It was intentional.
Obama talked about the Unger House in the Cayman Islands, the building that houses 60,000 corporations for tax evasion or whatever you want to call it. And then he said, and he's going to address it as president. And he put Timothy Geithner in part of the Treasury, and then Jack Lew to follow. Two foxes watching the hen house. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was ludicrous. And you could just go on and on. Obama was as much a guilty party. It started with, and I forget his name now, but George Bush's Treasury Secretary, they created a law that allowed him to go back to Goldman Sachs and not pay a dime on his $500 million in earnings if he took the job as the financial guy for the president. And that was a law specifically tailored towards this one man and this one man's story. I mean, literally, it was legislation geared towards one individual taking one position and ultimately getting a $500 million income tax abatement in return for being a partner in this Obama-Bush coordination of how do we really screw America and make it look like we're not screwing America.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing is, when Congress caught on to this, which they should, and I think they were sort of doing their job. I think it was in 2012? I think my memory is a little fuzzy there, but they tried to get Eric Holder to testify in front of Congress, and he refused. And so we have a string these days of Republican people who refuse to testify in front of Congress. Well, the precedent has already been set. There is no accountability.
Right.
And so our whole government is not accountable at this point.
And ergo the hypocrisy that just goes full circle every day. If you did it, I did it. By the way, you're talking about this, but why did you talk about that 6 years ago? And
Right.
It's just, and you're, and really, and I love what we're doing, and I love what we're talking about, but I think I love your candidacy more than anything. I want you to talk about that for a minute, and
Sure.
then.
So, anything specific you want to talk about regarding
Well,
the
just like we
candidacy?
said, I love everything you're working on. Stop giving tax breaks to the wealthy. I mean, let's just treat healthcare as a right. I've even said, if nothing else, it's something to compromise. If it's not the Affordable Care Act, let's call it the Available Care Act. Let's just fix it.
Yeah.
Whatever, however you can do it at a Missouri level. It was Mitt Romney that said that whatever Affordable Care Act he passed in Massachusetts only works for Massachusetts. What'll work for Missouri? And why is it only for Massachusetts? Why is it only for Missouri?
Yeah. Well, I would have to disagree with him, but the problem is that since it was Obama's little baby that became this Affordable Care Act, the Republicans, their nature was to fight him no matter what, even if it was to the detriment of the American people. So that's why they fought it from the very beginning. And Mitt Romney, being a Republican, who was the governor of the state of Massachusetts, yeah, he was able to pass it, and he took credit for it. And then suddenly it became a bad word. And then so he flipped and said, well, it worked for Massachusetts. It doesn't work for the United States. That's a bunch of BS. Come on. So it's, we're buying it. The political message becomes more important than taking care of the people. Regarding housing, one of the things that one of the ideas I have, and I've written them all down on my notebook here. I got all kinds of ideas. One of my ideas is to do something similar to what Sherrod Brown was trying to do on the national level, and that is to penalize any company or any holding company that's representative of a larger company, prevent them from owning more than, say, 50 homes. And once you can't make it illegal to own more than 50 homes, but if you start owning more than 50 homes, now you have to start paying extra taxes on it or give them some sort of incentive. Because what's happening is that young couples are going out there, and you get a lot of this from, particularly from Republicans these days. And I don't argue with it. They're saying people aren't having kids these days. Young couples are choosing not to have kids. Well, duh. They can't afford kids. And if they wait till they can afford it, then their bodies will no longer be able to produce more children. So, the big problem is I don't want to. If I were young again, I wouldn't want to raise a kid, unless I had my house, unless I had a good neighborhood and a good house and a safe environment for them. That's all we want. But when our houses are out of reach, or here's the thing: when both parents have to work in order to afford that house, who's taking care of the kids, right? And it ends up being, it's childcare, right? So there's a big push now to have childcare built into Missouri law. I'm not going to argue with that too much, but I do argue with the premise. Why is it we live in an economy where it's necessary to have childcare? Why is it we have kids, but who's raising them? Some stranger at a childcare center and not the parents. Right. And I know when I raised my child in California, my wife at the time, we made a deal. We said, whoever makes the most money will stay working, and the one who doesn't make the most money stays home. Well, I was making more money at that point. So I continued working, but she stayed home and took care of the child. And I thought that was the way it should go. I don't want someone else, some stranger, raising my kid. But that's the world we live in these days. And that's why young people are choosing different lifestyles. They, and so we have to get to the point where housing is affordable. Now, getting financial companies out of the housing market, that's one thing. But there are other pieces to this machinery that need to be addressed. But that's one of the big things I wanted to work on. Yeah, so let's talk about something else here. I want to talk about dark money. Politicians, we talked about it before. They don't work for the people. They work for their donors. Well, who are their donors? When you start looking into who their donors are, you run into a brick wall because a lot of this is dark money. And I would like to pass a law in Missouri. I know it's not going to work because I think that there's going to be a whole lot of pushback on it, but at least want to propose a law that campaigns, any political action committee or campaigns cannot accept money from anyone unless everyone all the way down to the last donor is identified and made public. One obnoxious example of this is something I call the NASCAR bill, which, how NASCAR, when people sponsor a car. Yeah, right. So you already know where I'm going with that. I want legislators to wear jackets that have patches on them that say who sponsored them. And the bigger the sponsor, the bigger the patch, And again, that law is more performative. That bill's going to be more performative than anything. But I think that'll get attention, right? That people have a right to know who's sponsoring their legislator. Because you vote for somebody, you want to know who's really sponsoring them. And I think I want that out in the open. Let's try something else here. Well, we talked about taxes already. We talked about public schools. Those are kind of like the big points I have, really. There's some minor points as well, but those are the big ones.
Though I think we've done a great job. Now, here's what I'm going to here's what I'm going to mention to you. I'm going to invite you back because I'm going to publish my plan for America. It's not a candidacy, and it's also got a new party name, so it's an independent party name. I'm not going to put any specific, but it is right now in the works, my plan for America. It does attempt to bring down the political temperature on several levels. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get you that, and then I want to have a discussion with you about my plan for America in the next... My guess is 30 days. I talked to Laura, my partner, and she's working on it. I sent her the rough draft, and she's really better at it. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm not exactly the smoothest guy in the world. But she's going to work on just fine-tuning it, and it's going to be published. It's going to be on our website, politicalnobrainer.com, and I'm going to send it to candidates like yourself, and I want to have that discussion.
Good, yeah.
That's coming up in 30 days, in less than 30 days. She'll have it ready for me in less than 30 days from now, but I'll be ready in that timeline. And then I think my computer's about to die, so I'm just going to plug it in, of course.
Okay, well, while you're plugging it in, I'll just say I like your idea there, and I would really like to read it. And it kind of reminds me of something that, as soon as you get your computer plugged in here, we'll go along with your part of the conversation. Okay. I did want to mention one thing, and this gives me hope. You talked about, the fact that we're fighting each other, the political parties are fighting each other and not getting anything done. And I don't want to plug one of my Republican opponents here, but there's a guy who's running for a state Senate seat. His name is Jim Avery, and he's a Republican. He's very much a MAGA Republican. But he and I have hit it off really well. And we were at a meeting the other night, because I see him in we attend a lot of meetings in Conway. We were at a labor meeting the other night. And he stood up and talked about the political rivalries that's going on. And he pointed me out specifically. And because he said, I was getting harassed on Facebook for something I posted. And he actually got in on Facebook and defended me. And he made it very clear in this meeting. He says, I will not vote for Dan Shaefer because I don't believe in the things that he believes in. He says, but, I know he has goodness in his heart and he wants to do the right thing. And then it was my turn to speak. It was like, okay, that's a tough act to follow. I don't want this to be a group hug or anything like that. But I said, I said the same thing. Is I got a lot of respect for Jim, even though I won't vote for him because I got another guy I'm going to vote for. But I said basically the same thing. I said, if we're focusing on fighting each other, we're not focusing on the people. And that got a lot of good head shakes on that one, and people agreeing with me on that one, because that's what politics is rapidly becoming right now. And
it's just ripping each other apart.
We're ripping each other apart, yeah.
And just like you said, I remember John McCain when he defended Barack Obama. And I thought it was beautiful. I remember that till this day. I could literally almost repeat the words he said, that he wouldn't have that conversation. Barack Obama's a good family man. And they were trying to imply he was a Muslim and a terrorist, and Barack Hussein Obama and the whole silliness of that. And I love it. And I really, like I said, Dan Shaefer, House candidate for Missouri House. I'm looking forward to that. We're going to have another conversation.
Yeah,
I hope.
Absolutely.
I will email you, sir, and get you on. And so thank you so much, sir, for joining me. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I love this conversation. I love doing what I do. Like I said, I no longer in competitive politics. When I was in it, I always made the statement, I don't raise money, I raise awareness, and everybody just thought I was an idiot when I would say that. So now I raise awareness through the podcast, and I found my wheelhouse, and I'm excited to, when people like yourself take part in it, I'm really thankful and really grateful for that.
Well, I definitely would like to see what you've written, because I've often asked people, and they do respond. They tell me what they want. I says, where is your head at? What are you thinking? It is one reason why I actually attend a lot of Republican events in this area, and they all know me, and they know that I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not attending their event to argue with them. I'm attending the event to find out what they're thinking. My opponent, he has an opponent as well for the primary. I know both of them fairly well, and I spend time with them. And yeah, we don't agree on stuff, but when we sit down and talk, I had lunch with one of the guys. some months ago, and we sat down and started talking about it. We realized we agree on a lot of stuff. You know, we want the best for our kids. We want good education. We want a safe place to live. We want our government to work for us. You know, and as to how we do that is where our differences lie. But we can agree on a lot of stuff. And so that's the way politics should be. And that's what I'm hoping to bring back to the state of Missouri.
You're going to do it. Just that momentum you got going now. And just that the story you mentioned about you guys, just like you said, you didn't want it to be a big group hug and singing Kumbaya. But the fact of the matter is that it's better that than the other direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. I'll talk to you soon.
Jeff. Okay, great. We'll talk soon.
When you get the plan, you can rip it apart. Well, don't be easy on me.
Send it to me. I love getting this kind of stuff. We will have the
conversation, and it will be published. The podcast will be published. However you feel about it, don't take it easy on me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.